Welcome to another video on Patreon. This is Tim in Tokyo.
This is Paul in Hanover, New Hampshire.
And this time, instead of TV trivia, we decided to take a different topic. And this is Paul's idea, so I'll let him get us started.
Yeah, I guess we're recharging our trivia batteries, or perhaps our trivial batteries, whichever you'd prefer. whichever you'd prefer. So, considering that we talked about our interest in producing a Spider-Man comic, but instead of a Batman comic when we were kids, and what might have led to that, I got to thinking about action figures, since action figures were a huge part of our lives with superheroes when we were, little kids, like grade school, middle school kids. And something I've noticed with my own child, Noah, who's now 11, turning 12 in February, is that he never got interested in action figures at all. He's interested in video games, electronics, but he never got interested in video games. He likes to read, and so it's not that he doesn't like stories, and he likes to watch, television shows and movies and such. But I guess what struck me in thinking about our childhood in this context is that we really stuck it out with action figures. We apparently had a very different way of thinking about what it meant to play, perhaps, than my son does. And not every kid is into action figures or was into action figures even then. So I was thinking, what is it that caused us to be so dedicated to our Batman and Spider-Man action figures, the 8-inch Migos that we had starting when I was about 6, I guess. Would have been about
Yeah.
1975,
Um,
74,
yeah, I
75.
think we figured out that you got Spider-Man for your birthday in 75, which would have been your 7th
My
birthday.
7th birthday. And that, cascaded into quite a collection of both Spider-Man and Batman figures, a couple of Spider-Man villains, and then a bunch of Batman and Robin villains. We did get a Robin as well as a Batman. So my question is, why? What was it about action figures that attracted us so much, and why did it last so long? This attraction to the point where we actually brought, even when we moved to Cedar Rapids when I was 12 or 11.
11.
We brought the action figures along, and Tim was by this time, 14.
14.
We brought the action figures along and put them back into their drawers in their
Yeah, with their carpets and their beds and their
the whole like bedroom suites that we'd created for them with wondrous help of our mother, who sewed sheets and pillows for them and taught us how to do it for the next generations of action figures. So what was it about that compelled us to even continue to preserve their bedroom suites even after we'd stopped playing with them? I don't think we ever really played with them at all in Cedar Rapids.
not
We were
much.
both
Yeah.
we'd outgrown them. And anyway, I was into Star Wars action figures at that point.
Yeah. Well, and also we had a smaller room in Cedar Rapids, and there was no room to put the dressers that we kept them in our bedroom. They were in the basement, and we just kind of didn't get down there to do anything. But as you were talking, I was thinking, before we had action figures to act out stories with, we had what we called Funny Island characters to act out stories with, which were on various scales of, animals and farmers and soldiers and Fat Albert characters and whatever else we came up with that was about the right size.
Yeah, we had those hard plastic Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids figures, every single one of them, including Bucky, whose neck was so skinny it broke off. Yeah, headless Bucky.
Well, Bill. It was the representation
That's
of
right.
Bill Cosby as a kid.
That's right.
Yeah, that we hardly ever played with that one because the neck broke like immediately.
Yeah, we should have tucked his head under his arm and made him the headless Cosby or something.
And stuffed animals also. We acted out
Yes.
stuff with stuffed animals, when we were really little, before, So all this being before we got into Batman or Spider-Man. So, we had a history already of using various kinds of toy figures to act out stories, and the Batman and Spider-Man action figures were just the next step in that.
Yeah, I mean it's a kind of impulse not only toward narrative but toward drama, toward like creating theatrical versions
Hmm.
of the
Hmm.
stories that were swimming around in our heads, which were often very derivative, right?
Yeah.
We would take them from comic strips or usually cartoons, I
Yeah. Or
think,
from the
because we
Batman
watched all
show.
right. We
Hmm.
watched giant like stacks of cartoons in those days as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's interesting. I hadn't really thought about the genealogy, that we've gone back to, that goes back to, just playing with stuffed animals. But certainly the super animals, which were these kind of bendable rubber figures, not the hard plastic ones
Hmm.
that the Cosby and the Cosby Kids represented. But these were like long, stretchy animals who had like
Yeah.
long arms and legs that you could bend around because they had
Yeah.
wire inside, kind of like big pipe cleaner figures.
Hmm. Although we fit them into the Funny Island universe anyway. Funny Island being our dad's train table.
Yeah, and it's interesting that we got so interested in crossovers, so that all these figures were all part of the same world. We had really no notion whatsoever of the Marvel universe at that point because
No.
it was too early for us really to even have gone to Kyle's house much and read those comics or really thought about that in terms of a kind of crossover universe.
Hmm. As far as continuing to keep them in their drawers after we stopped playing with them, after we basically outgrew them, I don't know. I think it was maybe just sort of a shrine to our childhoods.
Well, yeah, I mean, we got nostalgic for things like 14 seconds after we stopped doing them. In some cases, um, it's like you remember when we used to play with Batman and Robin action figures? That was such a poignant time for us, Paul. That was last week. Well, it was still poignant. Um, yeah, I mean, it certainly it probably kept, in terms of its effects, it probably kept us closer. You were 3 years older than me. And yet, we've always been close. I think, probably the farthest we were ever apart in terms of just, closeness as friends was probably when you went to college. And then there were some years in there when you were in Japan and we didn't get to communicate as much. Now that we talk, once, twice, three times a week, said Lionel Richie, and we're texting each other all the time. It feels, much more like we're kind of at least living in the same town, like we always dreamed of doing when we were little.
Yeah, pre-internet era. Yeah, we after I came to Japan, we weren't well, even before I came to Japan, when I was in college or you were in college, we didn't have much contact, especially when I was in college, I came home a lot on weekends,
Hmm.
so I'd see
Hmm.
you then. But
But I wasn't much of a letter writer, never
no,
was
no.
at all. So,
And after I came to Japan, I would get like a huge letter from you, and then like nothing for a few years, and then this huge long letter from you again. Burst
I
of
could say I was
communication.
I could say I was saving it up. Um, yeah. So, I guess, yeah, I'm just thinking too about the fact that you wrote Timothy Bear books, that is, books based basically on a stuffed animal.
Yeah.
But that were part of a larger universe
Hmm.
that overlapped with the Funny Island
Yeah.
universe that we created around Dad's train table.
Hmm.
Funny Island was the
Yeah,
train table,
it
and
was all of a piece. The Batman Spider-Man
Mhm.
stuff later was separate, as far as I can remember. But
it was, but it was related in that there were elaborate storylines that we were trying to act out.
yeah,
So
not the
yeah,
same universe, but yeah, it was the same
no,
kind of thing.
yeah, perhaps the action figures were just a more age appropriate and convenient way of playing out those narratives than writing books about them would have been. But then we started doing comics, and when we started doing our own comics, then we were kind of melding the old, the writerly aspects of the narratives that we wrote as the Paul and Bear and Tim Bear books with the superhero interest,
Hmm.
and also the growing interest in the Marvel universe during those later years when we were in our low teens, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
So yes, it's one of the saddest aspects of our childhood, of our lost childhoods, if you will, that we don't have any of the Miko action figures. They've probably been lost or stolen. Stolen probably when our sister. We should just cut this out. I don't want to talk about that so much.
No, me neither.
But yeah, but we had stuff in a storage space that that may or may not have been stolen, and we don't know where these things are anymore. I have thought about, excuse me, at least trying to repurchase a Spider-Man action figure, just to have one that's in pretty good shape. But man, the prices are really through the roof on eBay. And if you want one that has its full costume, that's not all torn up or the snaps haven't come off. And I could sew stuff back on, but I'm getting a little arthritis in my thumbs. It's a little harder these days. But it would be fun to find myself a ham net, a red ham net, of course, and hang Spider-Man on a thumbtack from the ham net. Thumbtack in the ham net, Spider-Man hanging off the ham net. It would be funnier to do a piece of twine or kite string like we initially used when Spider-Man was continually being reordered in 2 weeks from Sears when he wasn't showing up in Centerville, Iowa, apparently because Electric Company had made him so popular. I thumbtacked a piece of string to the wall. I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, in anticipation of Spider-Man hanging from it. In retrospect, it seems a little bit like we were the bad townspeople from a Western. It's like, soon as he comes to town, we're going to string him up. But there wasn't a noose at the end of the string.
No,
as it turns out, yes, as it turns out, his fingers were slightly separated, but close enough together that if you stuck something between them, it would stay. And so, he wasn't very heavy. So he actually hung from first the string and then the ham net quite ably. So if any of the patrons have any, fun stories about their own youth with action figures, it could, the only bad news about sharing them with us, which we would love to have you do, would be that it might stir more memories in us that we would then have to tell you about because we have this compulsion about that, as you know.
Yeah.
Oh, so speaking of compulsions from our youth, I have a magic trick to show our patrons. Yes, I've when I was a kid, when I was probably about the same age, maybe 7, 8, I joined something called the Young Magicians Club through Children's Magazine. It was if any of our patrons are about Tim's and my ages,
Children's Digest.
Children's Digest, that was it. Children's Digest, the Rice Magic Company might ring a bell for you because Rice stuff was sold in stores along with Pressman Magic and Adams Magic at toy stores and department stores. And the Rice Company supplied the Young Magicians Club. And for something like $5.99 a month, I would get a different magic set every month, just a single trick usually. Yeah. And I got kind of obsessed with it, but the problem was I was a little bit too young to do things like put cigarettes into a magician's secret thumb tip.
Isn't that for the old Magicians Club?
Well, that's the joke. See, I've kind of gotten into magic again just because it relaxes me. I'm not planning to perform it for anybody except for you poor people. It's relaxing. I like, card tricks. I understand, what I'm being asked to do in the magic trick instructions a lot better than I did when I was 8. It's part of the reason I got so frustrated. And thinking back, some of the tricks that I've picked up in the last couple of months have been really cool. And the tricks that we got when you and I were kids, and you were into magic a little bit as well, were really lame. I mean, super lame. The Moneymaker was probably the coolest thing we'd ever found. And boy, was I disappointed when I found out that you couldn't actually print your own cash. Oh, what a bummer. The Johnson Smith Company had been messing with us in those comic book ads for years by suggesting, implying, never expressly saying that we could print our own money with the Moneymaker. But anyway.
Yeah, it looked like a printing press, but it actually had like one piece of cloth or whatever through both rollers, and so you would hide a printed bill in there and then
and
take a
wind
blank
it
piece of
back.
paper.
Hmm.
Yeah, and then you would wind it, and it would appear that the blank paper was having money, being printed as money.
Yeah, yeah, it was a really cool effect and kind of ingenious. I'll bet that many of our listeners know exactly what we're talking about without any description. But so here's the trick: it's kind of hilariously called mentalism by magicians. But here's the trick: I have some cards here that I think you can probably see pretty well. Yeah, see, look.
3D House of
So
Cards.
yes, exactly. So I'd like you to I'd like everybody to concentrate on one card. Just pick one card among these and concentrate on it. Remember what that one card is. Okay.
All right.
Okay. So you've concentrated on the card. So I'm going to close these up, and I'm going to take a card out. And if I've done this right, I will have taken your card.
You did. Wow.
I took your card.
Impressive.
And the funny thing about this trick is I took everybody's card. Everybody watching this will see that their card was missing the second time. So, yes, I can guarantee that. So anyway, it's pretty cool, and consider that your Christmas present for this holiday season, or
Okay.
holiday present.
It gives me an inkling of maybe what happened, but anyway.
Yes. I'm terrible at keeping the secret of these things. But anyway,
Rewind the video and see for yourself.
hey, you. See, if only I just kept my big mouth shut, it probably would have come off a little bit better. So anyway, a little bit of fun. Next time, I'll try to be a little bit less forthcoming with whatever I tell you about the trick. But at least you got that 4.5 seconds of like, ooh, that was really cool. Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess that's it for this video. So I think we'll probably be back to TV trivia next time. I haven't come up with anything, but usually if I sit down with IMDb for a couple hours, I can come up with
Yeah,
5
sometimes for me
questions.
it's like 10 minutes. It's like, oh, yeah. And the questions aren't necessarily all that good, but you can always reformulate them as you go. But now that we've declenched the muscle a little bit, the trivia muscle, we can, now come back with, fresh eyes and fresh ideas for new, exciting questions about 50-year-old television shows.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so thanks for watching.